Every now and then I'm fortunate enough to interview a really good friend of mine. And today I have one of the premier experts from the world of sports psychology. Today on Up Close and Personal is Robert Andrews. Robert, welcome to my show today.
Thanks for having me, Rick.
Tell our viewers who may not know exactly what a sports psychologist is and some of the things that you do.
We work with performance, but we work with the mental and emotional side of performance. Most athletes spend most of their time working on their physical training, strength and speed and endurance, quickness, things like that. But in sports, as you probably heard, the mental side of competition is half the game, and that's where I come in.
Now, how'd you even get into sports psychology? Because I don't think I ever even heard of it until you started telling me about it a few years ago.
Well, I started doing human performance work back in the early 90s, and I did that for many, many years, and I had a lot of passion about it, and then that kind of started waning. It always felt like something was missing. And then I just had this aha to take all my years of training in human performance and trauma resolution and those things and weave that into a sports psychology practice, and then it exploded, literally.
When you say trauma resolution, is that around injuries?
It can be around injuries. It could be a traumatic event that, let's say, an athlete strikes out with 2 on in Game 7 of the World Series, and their performance isn't the same the next season. We go back and work with them to resolve that experience in their mind, in their heart, and then what we usually see is performance returns back to where it was. And in most cases, they perform better.
So take me through a timeline, for example, of how you might work with that athlete that struck out with 2 out in the bottom of the 9th in getting his performance back up.
I have a great example, a real-life example of a gymnast who, by some accounts, should have made the 2004 Olympic team. After not making the team, he struggled with his performance and his training and his self-confidence. And in 2007, his coach asked me to start working with him. And so what we did is take a look at where his talent level was, what his upside was, what his potential was, and what was in the way mentally and emotionally of him realizing that potential. So I helped him through his upset around 04 and then start really reclaiming that talent and that self-confidence. And to make the long story short, he went on to Beijing and won a bronze medal with the U.S. men's team.
Tell me some of the either techniques or some of the processes that you've developed in working with an athlete like Raj. I'm guessing you're talking about Raj.
Raj Bhavsar, of course, yes.
Okay. So tell me what you did with Raj.
Well, first I had to get Raj to learn how to trust himself and trust the sport again, and that started with him trusting me. So we developed a relationship that created the safety and the space for him to start exploring his upsets and things like that. And then a lot of it has to do with going back and just what I call re-scripting. You've heard me use that term before. Re-scripting some of those experiences in his mind, in his heart, to where he had different outcomes. And through that he was able to put a lot of the upset behind him, and then his lights turned back on again. I can remember specifically when that happened, where he turned that corner and got back on the national team and then made the Olympic team.
So we talked a little bit about gymnastics. What other types of sports and sports-related injuries are you interested in?
It's seasonal. Right now I'm working with a lot of gymnasts. I'm working with a lot of baseball players as baseball season's gearing up, softball. In the fall seasons, I see a lot of soccer players, football players, basketball players. Right now I'm seeing swimmers. So whatever the sport that's up is, when they get into performance, that's when the pressure starts building. That's when the symptoms start showing up. So that's when my phone starts ringing.
Now, you named a bunch of sports. Are you working with amateur athletes or professional athletes?
Both. And even high school. So high school, college, professional, minor league, major league, Olympic.
Now, did you have an impact moment in your life that sort of might have opened your eyes up to the possibilities of all this?
Yeah, I was sitting at lunch with my wife one day, and I had been doing like traditional psychotherapy work, and it just wasn't filling me up anymore. My heart wasn't in it, and I was sitting at lunch with her one day, and I got this like a plasma TV vision of what I'm supposed to be doing with athletes, and specifically working with athletes around injuries. So I started tearing up, and she said, "What's going on?" I said, "I know what I'm supposed to do next." And I described the vision to her, and I went and talked to an old buddy of mine who's an athletic director and high school football coach, and told him my vision and what I wanted to do, and he said, "Nobody's doing that. It's brilliant." So he sent me my first case, and it was a phenomenal success. And then it has a life of its own. It just took off.
Are sports psychologists like yourself, are they misunderstood? Are they accepted into professional and amateur athletes' lives, or is there still some misconceptions out there?
It's a great question. There's a stigma. I had a really good gymnast drop by my office with her mother this week, and she was hesitant to come in because my business, the Institute of Sports Psychology, has the word psychology on the end. And there's a stigma that goes with that. And some athletes don't want anybody to know that they came to my office. So part of my mission is overcoming that stigma, that to make it commonplace that an athlete comes to see somebody like me just as they would a nutritionist or a strength and conditioning trainer or someone like that.
What kind of exercises can athletes do to reduce their stress during a competition?
One of the most important tools that I use, and I teach this to every athlete that I work with, is helping them find what I call their ideal pressure zone or their peak performance zone. And the model there is that if you go into a competition and you don't have enough pressure, you're going to fail. You're not going to perform up to your highest level of talent. And if you have too much pressure, let's say on a continuum, you're out at a 9 or a 10, your brain's going to start sending signals to your body to tense up. So one of the first things I do is help them find their number. My son's a baseball player. He's a 6. Raj is a 7. A new gymnast that I started working with this week is a 4-5. There's a swimmer I'm working with that's a 5. So they know their number, and then I teach them how to recognize that number or that level of pressure in their body, because it's a sensation that they have in their body. I'm very body-oriented in the work that I do. So when they get into competition and their pressure is too high or too low, there's mental techniques, there's breathing techniques, and there's visual techniques that they use to stay aligned for that peak level of performance. Like if, for example, if a gymnast is going to do a vault, that's about 8 seconds. So they need to be in that zone for those 8 seconds only. If I'm working with a baseball pitcher, he needs to be in that zone every pitch. So if you see a pitcher that I've worked with, they have their feet on the rubber, they pause, which means they're finding their number. They take a deep breath, adjust their number to the zone, and then throw the pitch. And it's a fascinating, fabulous technique to work with, and especially when I know what I'm looking at. It's really fun to watch.
Did you develop the technique?
Yeah. Well, I developed the body parts of it. It's called the bell curve of sports performance. That's been around forever, but as you know about me, I'm real body-oriented, so I get athletes to help them learn how to understand what's going on with their body and where do they feel stress and pressure and tension, and then use visual awareness, mental awareness, and breathing to move that number where it needs to be.
You know, I read somewhere recently that in addition to athletes, you're beginning to work with coaches to help them shape the dynamic of their team and create a collaborative team. Why don't you tell me a little bit more about that?
That's exciting. I always say that a coach is either opening up an athlete or they're shutting them down. And I hear all kinds of horror stories about how coaches shut athletes down. And I believe that when they're doing that, they're really not coaching from their best self. So what I do is I work with the coach and I do a personality profile, and I say, this is how you're showing up as your best, but when you get under stress, performance isn't going well, the game's not going the way that you want it to, a whole nother part of your personality comes up that's very destructive to your relationship to your player and your team, and your performance is going to suffer. And these coaches they're blown away by what's going on with them and their teams when they learn how to stay in a better part of their personality, more heart-centered, I guess you would say.
So in the world of sports psychology, how do you want to be remembered?
I shifted a paradigm. I changed a paradigm.
And how about in the world of being a father? How do you want to be remembered?
I was a good dad.